So we're going to have a crack at this freedom of speech lark. Why is freedom of speech important? I'm going to be standing here saying a few things that many people are going to disagree with. I may even get called the R word, which isn't revolver or reverend, it's racist. But freedom of speech is something that we absolutely have to have in this country. And even in my own family, you will find people that don't understand that the reason why you must enshrine freedom of speech in law is so that you can say things that other people don't agree with. If everyone always only ever agrees with what you're saying, you might as well be having a knitting circle and talking about whether you're to knit and purl. But freedom of speech is about saying things that people don't like, don't want to hear, and even disagree with. So some of the things I'm going to say today, even I don't like. So people are not going to like to hear about racial issues, and even I don't want to hear about racial issues, but there's a crime being committed in this country and around the world, particularly in the white Western world, that is probably up there with the Bolshevik Revolution in terms of the displacement and replacement of a particular racial group. Now all around us today we've got the usual array of Christian and Muslim and religious preachers. All of these people are Abrahamic religions from the Levant, but I'm a pre-Christian European pagan, just a nominal pagan. So as far as I'm concerned, all of these people can go back to the desert, get out of my lounge and stop arguing amongst themselves about how I'm to relate to them and the world. We did this, the heart of the Christian, the European soul is a pre-Christian European pagan, and these people, their ideology runs completely counter to the ancient European pagan soul. Our conception of time is cyclical, not linear as the Christian, Judaic and Muslim approach is. So when people will talk to me and say, well, how did things begin? That's quite irrelevant because we're talking about a cyclical approach to the universe. I also want to sort of delve into the foundational controversy that we're finding in this period right now, as is so prevalent with the Brexit debate. Why is it that the left and the right have absolutely nothing in common and can find no common ground whatsoever? On the political left, they seem to be base their ideology on man-made propositions. The foundational controversy to do with sameness and difference. When we're talking about the left, man-made ideology, their ideas come from man-made ideologies where everything has to be the same, radical egalitarianism and equality. The pre-Christian notion of all of this is to take your moral standpoint from nature, which has in it difference and inequality. So on the right, we have inequality and difference is a moral good, and on the left, equality and sameness is a moral good, and that's why neither can the same meet. And we see this working out in contemporary London in what we're seeing all around in the advertising industry, which is a fairly obvious approach and propaganda campaign to raise one racial group and sublimate another racial group. This is where it gets very touchy, and nothing I'm saying here today should be construed as being an attack on any other particular racial group, white or brown or Chinese or anybody else. It's just a statement of what we see about us. This is a nominally white country, or it used to be when I was a young fellow, a very white country. But now we see that the white guys seem to have lost their sexual mojo, and most of the pairings you see in this city are of a mixed race nature. One of the ads I've seen lately, just to put a finer point on it, is an ad that says 4 out of 5 of us will contract a particular disease or such and such. And 4 out of 5 of us, and it's shown a young black child or a young Indian child. They use the word us for a particular reason. This is to make sure that white people are inured to the concept of racial difference. Why would you use that word if you weren't trying to do that? You see this in all sorts of other things around this town, like when you would see a white person on the back of a bus in an advertisement, that would be the girl that's shown as an example of alcoholism. but the African would be shown as an example of educational excellence or physical excellence in terms of showing an advertisement for a gym. Once again, this isn't to say that there's anything wrong, and I'm not denigrating any particular racial group, but where you have a white country and you're explicitly choosing people of a particular race to show a particular type of paradigm, there's an agenda in play. And you will see that in the continual displacement of one racial group in favour of another racial group. And of course we see what appears to be just the loss of sexual mojo on the part of the white guy. When a young white girl is faced with this continuous barrage of anti-white propaganda, it's not hard to see where her affections and loyalties will lie in the face of that overwhelming barrage. Now, why is this occurring? You only need to look at the European Union to see where it's coming from. Richard Coudenhove Kalergi put together a plan in 1925 called the Kalergi Plan in a book called Practical Idealism, in which he propagated the idea that the European man of the future would resemble the ancient Egyptians, i.e. he would be a coffee-coloured person. Why would anyone want to do that, you might ask? It seems to be unbelievably evil. Well, it's part of the European plan for European unification, and the essence of that plan is to not only abolish the political boundaries between the countries of Europe, but also the ethnic identity of the European people altogether. Why would you want to do that? Well, it creates a homogenised, mongrelized population that's easy to control and obedient. You may remember the scene from the Matrix movie where Morpheus holds up the battery and he says he wants to convert you into this. Just a compliant and obedient unit of production and consumption. And that's what's occurring. We have a population that doesn't speak the same language, cannot unify, is not homogenous, and cannot resist anything, even if it wanted to. What would it be like if you had a country and a government where the government actually stood and promoted the ideas for the parent population? A country with a government that actually supported its host people. These are not outrageous propositions. They're propositions that should be natural and normal and understood. But they were never written into any kind of constitution because no one ever believed in their wildest dreams that a government in the future would actively conspire to completely replace its own population. So what would it be like if you had a media establishment that sought to show young white men in a positive light and young white women as beautiful, feminine, and happy to have children? Wouldn't that be amazing? And what about advertisers that did the same thing? And what about government controls that sought to make sure that manufacturing stayed in this country, employment stayed in this country, rather than farming out industrial manufacturing to foreign imports? What about a migration policy that absolutely guaranteed that the English people would never be replaced in their own country? And this, of course, applies to other countries as well. I come from New Zealand, and our country is being rapidly replaced by foreign people. Nothing wrong with those people, of course, and they're only doing what I would do in their position. And I've said this when I've spoken in Auckland, that they're only doing what any normal human being would do if the government of a country makes it really obvious that you're welcome and promises to give you benefits and housing and unemployment benefit and sickness benefits and whatever, and all you have to do is turn up. Any sane person would take advantage of that. And what about an economic policy, for instance, that sought to make sure that a man, a husband, in a 40-hour week could earn enough money to support a wife and 3 or 4 children? Now, a collection of policies and objectives from a government of that nature sound at this point quite extraordinary, but there's nothing unusual or wrong with those policies. The liberal left will say that they're racist, but is it racist to simply support your own people? The left-wing idea, the Trotskyite version of the word racist, it's a word invented by a bagel-baking gentleman by the name of Lev Davidovich Bronstein in the Soviet Union in about 1926. He needed a convenient psychological weapon that he could bash the white Russian Christians with so that they wouldn't resist the implementation of the Soviet plan. And that was a convenient instrument to hand: racism. So when I say I'm a racist, what does that mean? It means I recognise the intrinsic value of race. It's not a social construct. I'm not a Chinaman and neither am I an African. There's nothing wrong with Chinese or Africans, but I'm just not one. And so when I say racist, that's what I mean. But when a left-wing liberal says racist, he thinks I hate people because of the colour of their skin, which is, you could never have anything more stupid and ridiculous than that proposition. You might just as well be hating people because of the size of their earlobes or the length of their fingers. No one's ever done that. The left-wing idea of racism and racist is completely stupid. So that's pretty much the nutshell of the message I want to put out there today, that there is a crime being committed not just in the UK. This is the epicenter of it. I've travelled all around Europe and I've never seen anything like the anti-white propaganda you see in the media in this country. It's completely overwhelming. But you do see it all over the world. And that's the message that we need to understand. And the United Kingdom and white people worldwide will never will not survive in this country beyond another 1 or 2 generations unless we have a complete reboot of the spiritual political system to regenerate our own awareness of ourselves. So other than that, I can just repeat what I've already said. So,
I totally agree with everything you're saying.
Thank you very much. A lot of people do agree with these things, but they're very politically sensitive and politically incorrect. So when anyone stands up and says in public, I'm a racist, well, I've said it and I'm not dead yet, but it's very important to define what that means. Once again, I'm not talking about Lev Davidovich Bronstein, otherwise known as Trotsky, who invented that word to force white Christians to shut up, stand down, stand aside, and don't resist. We now have a situation in this country where half the population think it's great and the other half of the population won't say anything. With regard to the half of the population who think that the mass immigration is great, that's just what they say. Whether they actually believe that or not is up for grabs. At the end of the day, it's communism pure and simple. 150 million dead people in the last 100 years under communism. It's not such a great idea. And yet we're allowed to wave the hammer and sickle. Anywhere in the Western world you can wave that flag and it's not banned. Yet more people died under that than under the swastika, an ancient symbol of the European Godhead. Well, I'm just rambling now. Is there anything else? We might as well call it there.